How's everybody doing? And welcome back to the New York City 1-to-1 build in Cities Skylines. I'm I Think You Know, and in today's episode, we're going to be building out probably the most requested area of Lower Manhattan, Battery Park City, as well as the World Trade Center complex. And before we dive into exactly what that entails, I do want to call out that this is going to be a relatively short time lapse today, and a much extended live play for an overall short episode, because I do intend to release my first of the companion, more educational videos surrounding the series directly after this, hopefully within the next week following it, but we'll certainly have to see how that comes along. But in this episode, we're going to be building not only Battery Park, predominantly in the live play, but all of the buildings of the World Trade Center. And I do want to first call out that the World Trade Center we will be building today is the modern iteration of it, not the version of it built in the 70s and tragically destroyed in the attacks on September the 11th. For me, that's a pretty personal event, as it is for many New Yorkers. I was lucky to not have lost anybody close to me in it, but certainly many people did, and it was a very traumatic moment for this region and for the nation. And I think it's best to honor those who perished in that day by building what it looks like now and the memorial, rather than trying to recreate something that no longer exists. So the buildings we'll be placing down first here was the World Financial Center. That is the kind of L-shaped giant building on the west side of West Street. And that's a really old asset, and it's a little funky, and it's not quite exactly sized right, but I've done my best to lay it down where it looks right, and I've detailed it a little bit later, and I think it looks well enough. And then besides that, I've laid down all of the World Trade Center buildings. So within the game, or of course wonderful content creators, modders have made these, but I've put down World Trade Centers 1, 7, 4, and 3. As well as the Oculus, which is that, bird-looking, white-spined Santiago Calatrava masterpiece slash debacle, depending how you look at it. It's a really beautiful piece, but Calatrava is a Spanish architect and well known for some really cool designs, but also very frequently goes over budget. And considering how much transit is actually needed in New York, I've always seen it's kind of a shame that we spent so many billions on that and so many buildings on the Fulton Center not too far away from here, that when we could have probably built like entire subway lines for that amount of money, or Lord knows what else. For the remainder of the episode though, what we're going to be not the episode, but the time lapse at least, we're going to be building out the World Trade Center Memorial. So of course, after the towers were destroyed in 9/11, there was a lot of debate at the national level and the local level about what it would be the best way to rebuild this area. And for many, they view this is a grave site. There are plenty of bodies who have still never been recovered, and plenty of loved ones who have never been able to get back their loved ones' remains. So this is very controversial how it was designed in general, but what the city ended up deciding on was this really striking design with the two memorial pools, which are built on the exact footprints of where the original World Trade Centers 1 and 2 are. And then this building that I'm placing down here in the middle, which is the 9/11 Memorial Museum, which if you've never seen it, it's a really impressive museum. It definitely tugs at the heartstrings, although it's been controversial itself for maybe not telling all the stories that it needs to. Now, surrounding the area is, to me, what should be a very public place, and unfortunately, given all the security theater in this area, it's not often gives you that sense of feeling of community. But in the game, I really wanted to make it a park within the game, but also let it exist in a way that the citizens can walk through it. So what I'm doing here is a pretty interesting technique. I'm laying the trees out in lines and then using surface pavement networks to add the pavement underneath them, because if you try just like decorating it with the surface painter, you end up getting like, it's never even, it looks really splotchy, and I didn't want that. If you look at this on Google Maps, it looks just like this. It has these kind of strips of pavement and small trees everywhere, lots of benches, and it tries to give you this communal feeling, or at least that's what I envisioned it as and what I wanted to bring to it in this build. And we'll take a look at it in a lot more detail during the live play, but wanted to just show it to you for now, exactly how it was built, because I think this is the most important central part of the build, and I really am happy with the way that it came out. Building all around that, of course, the World Trade Center building itself is gorgeous and has a little plaza next to it, although we'll talk about that creator and why it's so great during the live play as well, which I have actually recorded before this for once. I'm on top of my game, trying to bang this video out in just about a couple of days here. But outside of that, there are a few buildings that are missing in the complex. So there is no World Trade Center 5 and 6 in real life. 5 was never built, and World Trade Center 2 is what we're going to talk about in that educational video, most likely, in the companion to this, since that is a interesting building that hasn't quite been finished yet. And if you're familiar with New York at all, you'll know what I'm talking about. So you see a little bit of flooding there. That's going to get cleaned up. I don't really talk about it, but I do key in that entire area and use the terraforming tool to kind of hide everything quite nicely and get those really crisp angles to make it look as accurate as possible. But we'll talk about a whole lot more in the live play and get a really detailed view of this wonderful build. Stick around. All right, and we're back here in the live play. Let's take a look first at what we've built during the time lapse, and then we'll spend a lot more time talking about this area in general, as well as what was built off camera. So of course, from the time lapse rather, we have this absolutely fantastic World Trade Center 1 asset. I'll try and throw up on the screen if I haven't done it already. I'm actually recording this first. Who created this asset? But it's such an improvement over the one that was previously on the workshop. Of course, all the other buildings around it, 7, 4, and 3, are also previous buildings, but you probably noticed, or I called out at the end of the time lapse, that I did go ahead and color those buildings a little bit differently so that they try to fit in as best they can. And overall, I'm just really happy with how the park here came out, the memorial essentially with the pools and my stand-in for the museum. And I think one of the best parts about it is, as we're watching it go around live, is that people are actually using it. And we'll look a bit in a moment at how all the pathing around here is working. But one thing you will notice is there is a absolute ton of traffic coming through here right now. And that's because off camera, I've built out a large part of Battery Park City here. So for those who are not familiar with the New York area, this big extension from up here all the way down, essentially west of West Street, is Battery Park. And this land is actually all landfill. When they were digging out the foundations for the original World Trade Center back in the late 60s, early 70s, they basically used all that landmass and filled in this. And for a while, this is actually a sand beach in Manhattan. And there's some really wild photos of the early 70s with just such classic New York views. But after they landfilled all of this, they went ahead and added it, essentially made it a large residential complex. So what I've done, using both some of the condo assets from Smiles, whatever that user is, I'll throw it up on the screen if I can remember, and a lot of other assets, kind of layered things in. And I didn't get to finish the upper portion here, but I did want to finish this entire lower portion, and I really think it looks nice. One of the real keys to building really any city in Cities Skylines, and especially something with like New York and Lower Manhattan with such a high level of verticality, is that you really vary the building heights. And even some of these lower buildings, I could have used all of this just this type, or all of just this type or this, but putting in 2, 3, 4 different kinds of buildings there really gives it a nice level of variation. And I think the game is now over 9,000 residents, and I thought we would get to 10 in the live stream, but we didn't get there, and now we're almost there. I think the real downside right now is that there is an absolute ton of traffic, and let's back out real quick and show you that. Traffic, so before it was in the 60s, now it's in the 70s, not too bad, but you'll see that this area, because it's just now populating, but also some of the main north-south streets as well, are very heavily laden with traffic. And that's really my sign that One thing we'll have to do in a pretty close episode, or maybe in a live stream, will be to expand the mass transit, or really start building the first of the mass transit. But one part of mass transit that, well, maybe not mass transit, but better than driving, is walking and biking. And I've created a lot of, essentially mimicking the Hudson River Greenway that is that the Hudson River Greenway? They have so many different names for it around here. I'm looking off camera now, but yeah, the Hudson River Greenway, which is this long cycle path which connects from the bottom of the island here and eventually runs even further north. I've only completed it so far to the top of the World Financial Plaza and One World Trade here, but as you can see, it's already being used, and I think this is going to really help make this area come to life. I've actually connected these cycle paths with some invisible cycle paths through the intersection, so there's a completely uninterrupted view of those roads, as I'll show you here. And you can see how the cycling is already being used heavily, as well as the walking paths next to it. So as I've mentioned before in other discussions and other episodes, it's so important in your cities to not let Cities Skylines be a traffic simulation game, which it can so easily turn into if you just build roads and you don't think about walking, you don't think about cycling. But I mean, this is what you want. You want life in your city. You want people moving around as much as possible. And I think this is the best version of Battery Park that I've ever put together. And I've definitely built this a few times. And just some really simple detailing. Lots of trees with the prop line tool, which is now working. It wasn't working when I looked at the time lapse, but when I logged back into the game, it was working. If I haven't spoken about it already, you know, there's been a lot of drama in the community. I spoke a little bit about it in the last episode, but it seems to be cleared up now. I'm back on network extensions 2, which I only need because of the Brooklyn Bridge. And I'm also back on the standard Beauformer Harmony mod, as to avoid all the bit of scandals that were going around. Now, what we'll want to work on next in future episodes, again, I think some mass transit is definitely in order, or the track is going to continue to choke, but I like to finish some of this off screen and really just start continuing to go north. For those of you who missed the live stream and haven't checked out that episode, we did start creating some really New York feeling blocks over here, and now it's just a matter of expanding, and getting this city bigger and bigger than it ever has been. But I'm really excited about where we're headed, and as we start to reach uptown and we start to think about what's next, as always, I will leave you with this question of, what do you want to see next? What is most important for you to be seeing in this city? What piques your interest? Do you want to see trains? Do you want to see buses? Do we just work our way uptown? Do we go into Brooklyn? I'm not really too sure, but we have lots of options ahead of us and a long journey ahead. So once again, thank you all so much for sticking around. Check out the footage that's going to come after this. I'm searching for the word right now. It's a cinematic. You're going to love it. Thank you once again. See you all soon. Bye.